Well, got a newbie to the Fisher Poets Gathering next. Carlos Reyes has come out. You know, I've been carrying a poem called Moon Mullins around among my favorite poems for a long, long time. Clem Stark gave it to me. And when Clem hands me a poem and says, this guy's good, and I pay attention. And it finally occurred to me to look Carlos Reyes up this winter, and took some doing, but we found out where he lived, and he was really amenable to joining us. And it's just a terrific surprise and joy that he can come and be with us for the first time at the Fisher Poets Gathering. Thanks, Carlos. Come on up, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I've heard about the Fisher Poets for a while, and as John said, what got us together was Clem Stark. I never knew he was ever a fisherman, but he's done a lot of things. I would start by reading a poem that I actually wrote. I was down here at the middle school, and we had a snow day, which is kind of unusual around here. And I wrote something that happened some previous years, and I'm kind of in the last century, not, you know, but the 80s, 70s, and 80s and 90s. Red alders in midwinter. Out the window, sky slightly overcast, air cold, though it almost never snows here. The wind up from the east. The morning, the red sky, a warning to sailors, ships at anchor in the river, wait to go up to Portland. The bridge here I cross each morning, return over each evening, spans the estuary, connects two states of being. At low tide, the Desdemona sands showing where I could have gone aground one January afternoon in a boat called the Seagull, or I could have gone aground downtown, been bar-bound in a tavern called the Desdemona Club. There's just this quiet room, out the window, red alders. What I was thinking about was we brought this boat, the Mockin, up from Newport to fish. Actually, we were heading to a dry dock up in Portland. And as we crossed the bar, I was going up the channel, and I saw the bridge, and I said, I'll just aim for the bridge. And it wasn't until later that I got to looking at the charts, and there might be a foot of water at the sands, and the boat I was on took about 6 feet. So it could have been a disaster. But even the disasters bring nice memories sometimes. This is a kind of a cautionary tale. Words from an ex-fisherman to his ex-wife. This reef is extremely dangerous, even when winds are light and the sea otherwise calm. That's from boating in coastal waters. From this distance in time and space, there remains a pencil sketch of a reach of rip-rapped rocks, the north or south jetty, where we went through with little thought of rough bar and stormy seas, and returned each night to safe harbor. I could hear faintly the whistle, gong, and bell that marked the channel. In a windowless night of years, I can see Yaquina Reef, where a mast of a tuna boat stands above the rocks. Its crow's nest, a warning to me at least. Though you've never seen these things, I wish that you might, or imagine through these words, a warning to you also. I think that was written when I was in kind of a bad way. This is called Nelson. Okay. This is called Nelson Island, and it's a little thing off of Newport, but on some charts it's called the Rock Pile. And it's really not an island, but it's a place where the seabed rises up to about depth of about 70 fathoms. So It's called an island, Nelson Island. And I see here, I don't know, I suppose now everybody has GPS, nobody uses Loran. I don't know, because I'm not in it now, but in those days they said that Loran wasn't good until you got 100 miles offshore. Well, all of us know that for years fishermen driving up and down the coast are using Loran, and I actually learned to use it. But the guy I was with, we overnighted, and he woke me up at about 5 and said, "Go down and turn on the Loran and see where we are." And I said, "What Loran?" I had no idea. But I better figure out how to work this thing, because if it depended on me, I wanted to know where we were going or where we were. A long introduction. Nelson Island for Bud Sullivan. Out past the 100-fathom curve, at this hour, sky waves bounce off the ionosphere with tracings, hillocks, to confuse me as I attempt superimposing two mountains which are not mountains, but master and slave. Two signals translated into Loran lines tell me we have arrived. The ink line printout of the echo sounder, the bottom profile, a scrawl rising from the ocean floor. Suddenly, the water is barely 70 fathoms. No sunken Spanish pirate ships on this underwater island, guarded by dog, fish, among the mountains of sea green light. As I stand before the oscilloscope in the darkness of the wheelhouse at 4 a.m., no treasure but Dover soul, lulled in the shallow waters over Nelson Island. These are old poems. Sou'wester, or if you want to say southwester, I guess you can. Sou'wester is also a hat. Sou'wester. When he almost fell into the sea, no flash of events, his light breaking, his eyes before the railing grabbed instinctively at any hip pocket thing, his partner's Levi's. His heart was not pounding wildly in that second, nor later, when he suddenly remembered what had nearly happened. No shakiness as he looked out toward the sea, as seawater poured over the stern, wind coming up fast from the southwest. I was told before I went on this boat, never lean on the railing. It's an old boat. I didn't lean on the railing. I was thrown into the railing when we took one along the side. And fortunately, some wise person rove a piece of nylon line through this pipe, and that kept me from going over the side. And I had my partner by his seat of his pants. We would have both been over the side. The boat would have been headed for Newport all by itself. And this fellow that I was fishing with, I had occasion about, 10 years or so, bumping into him in Bend, Oregon. He'd since become a CPA. And that'll tell you something. And I said, Raymond, I said, my wife really didn't like being out there on the water. She said she thought it was dangerous. And he just gave me a real hard look and said, well, wasn't it? I love that boat, although the last time I saw it, I almost cried. It was up on the mud flat with the whole back end of it gone, the whole stern out of it, rotting away out there. And here's the poem that got us together. Moon Mullins. Now, if my memory serves, Moon Mullins was a cartoon character. I think K.O., there was this little scruffy kid who was, maybe that was the name of the cartoon. But at any rate, there was a man named Mullins, and it was called Moon Mullins. And we were heading out from Newport up to Astoria, and we weren't, either of us, too, keen, but we didn't know that much about boats and stuff. But Moon Mullins was an old shrimper from Louisiana, and he looked like he'd been around, he might know what what was what. Moon Mullins. The first time I met him, we were headed out of Newport for the Columbia Bar. He came up to the doghouse, took out the chart, ruler, and a number 4 pencil, drew a heavy line roughly north, and said, "This is the way we go, boys," and disappeared below. Now, I believe he once said, when I was with him, that the surface of the sea was rolling hills, green and sometimes blue, where goats, or maybe he said boats, gambled and frolicked, sometimes in bright sunshine, sometimes hiding behind waves in the fog. And I think I once heard him call the seaweed that collected on the lines goat's beard, or maybe he was just mumbling, or maybe it was a bit untranslated from his native language, whatever that was. Well, the one thing I'm certain he said, the one thing he was right about, was that the ocean has a face, angry or smiling, and you can read it, but you better read it right. Well, I lost time. I didn't know when we started, but anyway, I'm going to read a couple more poems. Some of you might have heard of this. I don't know, by now it's probably 20 years ago. I said maybe 10 years ago, but in my case, I never know. My wife always says, add another 10 to it. But there was a guy coming up from on Highway 18 up from the coast, towing a trailer with his boat on it, towing the boat by a line he had over his shoulder. He was going home. Now, as things would work out, a state cop comes along, and wouldn't you know it, he gives the guy a ticket for improperly towing a trailer. I couldn't resist this, but I cheated a little bit. I turned these fishermen into Greek sailors. The road away from the sea is difficult. The man pulling the boat up Highway 18 on a trailer, a tow line cutting into his shoulder, is Nikos, who flees from the angry ocean where fishing is bad, where he almost drowned. His partner, Elpenor, even more disgusted with life at sea, is 2 miles up ahead, his burden lighter by far, an oar over his shoulder. At road's edge, near the gates of a cemetery, he waits, shaking his fist at passing motorists. He is watched over by an angel in marble whose left forearm and wrist are mysteriously missing. The statue's disconnected fingers support the uplifted trumpet, which will announce the arrival of Nikos and the boat. Against the oak, Elpenor leans the oar. When I learn to talk, I'll finish this. Against the oak, Elpenor leans the oar, its heft sinking into soft grass and duff. Blue fisher's cap in hand, as the sun, a leaden 100 drachma coin, drops into the sea mist behind the mountains. Now this poem takes place on the other shore, on the Atlantic, and I had the pleasure of being at Arcadia National Park for a month as the writer in residence, a poet in residence, and I'm always interested in what rolls up on the shore, where everything we've ruined comes back to us. 1. As children, we went to the Pacific Ocean, took off shoes, rolled up pants, fancied ourselves beachcombers. We searched in the sand and drift logs for anything to take home to remind us of the salted waves. Most prized, pardon me, most prized, a glass fishing float, something that drifted in our dreams all the way across the ocean from Japan. Unsuccessful in our search, we got them for a quarter in a curio shop that sold everything nautical and saltwater taffy, made up stories of getting up before dawn, being the first out to the drift line. 2. 50 years later, Japanese souvenirs are back, once again capturing the imagination. Last month, it was a small dock that a tsunami brought to our Pacific shore with its microcosm, questionable gifts, instant tourist attraction. 3. But this afternoon, as I pause in my walk on Little Moose Island to write this, I sit on a granite boulder on the Atlantic shore, far from the Pacific. As I pick my way through sand and boulders, slipping around on kelp and bladderwrack to see what the sea has brought, tide-beaten lobster pots, their colorful buoys. With each high tide, there are more, so many you wonder how the lobsterman finds his pots. We used to harvest that salvage for garden and front yard decorations as decor in seafood restaurants. No longer exotic, the buoys are so commonplace we've lost interest. We turn away, sure the sea will take all the refuse back, leave it on some other shore. Thank you.